Tonight, the big three automakers continue to announce layoffs as the UAW strike is now on its 19th day. Ford has so far laid off more than 300 workers at a stamping plant and an engine plant, while General Motors has told more than 300 workers at 3 separate plants not to show up for work.
That's right. Meanwhile, negotiations continue between the automakers and the UAW after the union presented a counteroffer to GM. This happened last night for the first time in 11 days. Currently, around 25,000 of those UAW 140,000 workers are on strike across 34 plants.
Here with us again tonight, our former UAW spokesperson Brian Rothenberg over Zoom, as well as Wayne State Professor of Management Merrick Masters. Thank you both for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
So, Merrick, let's start with new vehicle sales. Some numbers were just released for Q3 showing that GM sales were actually up more than 20%. Now, this only goes through the end of September, so the first couple weeks of this strike. First, are you surprised by that? And when do you expect we will start to see a difference from this strike?
Well, I'm not surprised by that. There's an inventory that the companies are relying upon that they haven't exhausted yet, and they have several more days, several more weeks left in that. And it's been a good market, generally speaking. People are still spending at a robust clip. And overall, I think sales increased about 17% from what they were last year. So it's a good sign. It reinforces the UAW's point that the companies are doing well and that they're making money and that they ought to share it with the auto workers.
And Brian, with the announcement of these layoffs, I know this has to be a scary time for those employees. How are you feeling about the fact that they are still standing strong despite it all?
Well, I think it's important that they stand strong, but after going through all this, I think this is going to just drip up and up. If the pattern continues, you'll probably hear from President Fain tomorrow that he'll probably do some kind of an announcement again on Friday, and we'll see if it escalates even more to other plants, and that will tell us how close they are at the bargaining table. So, it's a nervous time for families. You can't forget, we all talk about this like it's some kind of a poker game. There are real people involved in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the big question every day is will and how much will this be expanded by? Merrick, do you think at any point Fain would pull that trigger of asking everyone to strike, or does most of his power lie in that threat that he could expand it?
Well, I think certainly a lot of his power lies in the threat and keeping his options open so he can incrementally push it forward. But at some point in time, he's going to have to bite the full bullet, so to speak, because people will get impatient. If this is going on for more than a month, they're going to say, we have to get this over sooner rather than later. So let's strike all of them, or at least one company-wide, so that they can feel the heat.
Sure. Merrick, are you surprised at all to see where things have gone?
Given all the anxiety leading up to the expiration of the contracts, I'm not surprised. I think Shawn Fain's strategy is to apply the pressure incrementally and hold out until he gets as much from the companies, and he's willing to wait.
Brian, like we've mentioned so many times, the solidarity, the strength and energy is there on the picket lines, but we're a few weeks into this now, well into the third week. Do you see that sentiment changing at all for any of the union membership?
Well, of course it does, because especially those people who have been out for 2 or 3 weeks, they're starting to receive those $500 checks, which are a lot lower than their normal salary during those weeks. In addition to that, you're starting to see other competing interests. I mean, I love you guys in the media, but last week we had the potential shutdown. Now we have a speaker crisis in Washington. So a lot of these satellite trucks disappear when that happens. And that takes away a little bit of the power. But ultimately, the power with the union is in the threat to strike. But there is a tipping point where members start to get a little worried. And I'm sure, I know that President Fain, because I knew him when I worked there, would be worried about those members.
Yeah, Brian, the pressure only can continue to mount as this stretches on. If you were still in that role, hypothetically speaking, what would you be saying to those members to encourage them?
Your power is in solidarity. Your power is in standing together. Yes, it can be difficult, especially if the weather starts getting colder or rainier or icier, but that is where you derive your power from. And ultimately, there will be a contract. You will have a contract. It's an employment contract, and this isn't going to go on forever. And, you know, we will see where it ends up. But right now, I think that we're in this for a little bit longer.
You know, we mentioned earlier in this newscast that tens of thousands of healthcare workers could soon strike. Here in Detroit, casino workers could strike in a couple of weeks. And that's in addition to a number of national strikes we've been watching for months. Merrick, do you think that the UAW, a union as powerful and as large as the UAW, is helping to influence that movement of strikes?
Well, I think it gives workers confidence in general and makes them appreciate the need to hold out and use their ultimate weapon. Obviously, we've seen the strike recede in usage over the past several decades to where in terms of major strikes, there are only a handful of them each year compared to several hundred in decades past. So when unions realize that they have to be willing to exercise this threat in order to achieve what they want, they watch the auto workers, and it gives them confidence that they maybe have to follow the same path, but it's worth it.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both. We'll continue to watch this one closely to see where it goes from here.
All right, Merrick Masters and Brian Rothenberg, we appreciate your time.